can tell you there are some advantages, with which IMGs have, because you see how the paradigms in medicine in general in this country are going to. We see a lot of disparities. We see a lot of disparity in health, in gender, and all those things. And if you literally, try to pinpoint these disparities in a lot of developing nations, we have been facing them for a long period of time. So the cohort which is being studied right now, we have seen that happening all our life, and there is a lot of things which can be done on those things. I can just give you a very small example of infant mortalities, right?
The IMG Roadmap is the only podcast dedicated to coaching international medical graduates in success blueprints for this unique pathway. I am Dr. Nina Loom, your host, a previous IMG-turned-hospital medicine physician, healthcare administrator, speaker, and coach. I empower, encourage, and equip you with actionable steps that you can take towards the residency position of your dreams. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IMG Roadmap podcast. Today's guest is a program director, Dr. Asim Kichloo. He's calling in from New York today, and I'm so excited to have him. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Asim. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you, and hello to everybody who will be listening to us.
Yeah. So can you share with us a little bit about your background, both in medicine and maybe even a little bit personal, however deep you want to go into it? We'd just like to know a little bit about you.
Absolutely. At heart, I'm a teacher. By profession, I'm a physician. That's why I'm in academics. I belong to a family of doctors. I am basically from the northern part of India, who always wanted to live a dream of the best healthcare system. And that is why I'm in the United States. Started my career as a resident in New York City. Very initially in my career, I knew that there were certain things which I could offer and serve for the improvement of the student and resident education. And that's why I chose this path. I'm a first generation immigrant who came to this country, and I'm really proud of that. And I mentor and guide a lot of IMGs to achieve and maximize their goals.
So you are spot on, because when I hear you say those words, at heart a teacher, it already speaks to probably the value that you're adding to the system, both as an educator in the graduate medical education space, but then also in probably the one-on-one work that you're doing with other IMGs as well, who have the same dream and same goals as you. I share in that. I'm from Cameroon myself, and it was that same dream of wanting to practice medicine and probably the best place that you can do it. And that same drive of being a first generation, like you're the first immigrant to move over and start on your own. So I definitely relate with all those things that you said. And so I was reading through, about you before you came on today. And, a lot of our listeners may not know that you're actively also a program director in internal medicine, and you have held and still hold roles as chief of hospital medicine at a medical center in New York. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what a program director is and because a lot of times sometimes we just know that program director is highest ranking individual in the program, and we're all afraid of talking to them, right? But tell us a little bit more about what is really a program director?
I have an interesting perspective about it. I would say, a program director is a position, and I'm serving in that position at this point of time. So there is a responsibility which has been either given to me or I have undertaken, and I have to serve in that position right now. And one of the things as a program director, which I think is the most important aspects of being in this position, is being an advocate for the learners. If you will ask me to summarize one thing about a program director, I would say it is being an advocate for the learners. And the learning is at multiple, levels and systems. We teach our residents and students the art of medicine. Now, when I say the art of medicine, that is different from just medicine. We teach them the new methods of medicine, because as you mentioned, a lot of international medical graduates who come to this country, they are very talented, but there is another art which they have to learn, whether that is a cultural art, whether that is the whole new dynamics of medicine which are practiced in this country, the ethics of medicine which are practiced in this country, and we just help them to explore, and we help them to find their passion and guide them in the right direction. So yeah, we are advocates for the learners.
And I like that you say it like that, because for many international medical graduates, they just feel like all that the program directors do is filter them out, right? They don't look at it as, oh no, we're really here to guide you. We're here to educate, direct you, to help you find this new career that you are seeking. So in essence, we are in support of you. We want to see your career flourish. And I think that that's a good way to demystify that, because indeed, you are carrying that torch of representing the specialty, but then also being a teacher and an advocate for seeing other people that will come out, physicians that will come in through the practice and go on and carry on that legacy that we have for whatever specialty that we chose. And in your case, so I really like that you described it as such. So, in that role, I'm sure you have come across, multiple instances as maybe, I don't know, what is your clinical background? Are you an IMG or not an IMG, or maybe you have personal experience in that? I'm not sure. I just thought I'll ask.
I am an IMG. I did my medical school back home in the northern part of India. And as soon as I finished, did some volunteer research work at Yale for almost 9 months to 1 year. Saw the different aspect of medicine in this country, which was research, and then started my career.
Awesome. So thanks for sharing that. And that just adds perspective for our listeners, because now it gives them a whole different, like, oh, wow, this person, this physician may have something similar with me, the listener, as an IMG. And usually then the recommendations that you offer us obviously come with a little bit more attention on their part, like listening in keenly. So can you share with us, one of the questions that we get a lot from international medical graduates who are looking at that goal of applying into residency, especially this September 2023, what are some items that you want us to remember or embody, or things that we could be working on right now in preparation of an application this fall?
Sure. I think one of the things which I have noticed over a span of almost a decade now is we get ourselves into a hole as IMGs when we start preparing for our USMLE exams after we are done with the medical school. One thing which I would suggest to the IMGs who have the mind to come to this country and practice medicine in this country, who want to have a career of medicine in this country, if they can plan ahead of time when they are in the initial parts of their medical school. Now, obviously, this is not a limiting factor, and I'm not saying that people who don't start in the initial part of the medical school, they don't have a chance. Absolutely, they have as much as a chance as anybody else. But I think it is a moral responsibility to people like you, me, and others who are in the system to guide the juniors, to keep these doors open for the juniors and this next generation, and guide them that what we could have done differently, they should follow, which is, starting this whole idea of taking the exams and getting into the system, not by the end of the medical school, but probably slightly earlier. And I know the demands of the medical schools in different international medical schools is really, really tough. But at the same time, I think if the motivation is there, there definitely can be a path where you can start a little ahead of time. And then obviously there are a lot of other things which we have to remember. We keep on focusing on USMLE scores, which are important, and you might be seeing the paradigm is shifting where the scores are being taken away, especially for step one. So building a profile, it's about building a character, right? You can be well dressed and you can be not well spoken, or you can be well spoken and you're not well dressed. What I'm trying to say here is that you have to focus on building an overall profile which shows your commitment to the field, which shows that you are in it with all your heart and passion. And that is something which I always mentor any new international graduate who wants to join this.
So you said you made two very crucial points, which I agree with as well. in light of, if you can incorporate, and guys, we're speaking to you because you're listening to us right now, you're driving, you're taking your kids to school, you're doing something else, but I want you to pay close attention. If you have the opportunity to work on your exams simultaneous with your current medical curriculum, you put yourself at an advantage where you don't graduate medical school and then have to sort of dedicate a block of time to work on these exams, which now creates some gaps in your education and other things that you have to deal with. But if you could do it simultaneous with your medical education, you're probably positioning yourself a lot better so that as soon as you graduate medical school, you're ready to apply. On the flip side to that, as an international medical student, it's been my observation that you can more easily get your rotations when you are still enrolled in medical school, which is a huge part of building that character that you talk about. Is your character you're trying to build is, I'm committed to neurology, and you are maybe along with your current medical education curriculum, when you have some time off of school, you can even book an elective in neurology in the United States, come out here and work in it, go back home while you're working in USMLE and your coursework. What you are doing is you're building that character, and it takes years in some instances to build it. So guys, if you're listening, Dr. Asim has given us 2 key points. One is incorporating your study earlier on so that you can work on building that character and not have to stop everything you're doing in your life and say, now it's time for me to build that person, right? To build the applicant or build a competitive, because this is a part of your academic life, and you should be doing this thing simultaneous with what you're already involved in. So I really like what you shared. Now, you mentioned this paradigm shift that we're seeing, and I think, in my opinion, step one not being numerical is playing a slight disadvantage for us as IMGs, because a lot of times we utilize a high step one score as a distinguishing factor. And so now we're sort of left with this pass fail, which is, well, it's good because everybody can pass, but at the same time, how else do I stand out, right? And I get this question a lot from IMGs, especially because we're talking about building this character. How do I stand out? Because we all want to we just don't want to bring the status quo. We realize that there are great medical schools in the US, they're producing outstanding physicians, but we want to stand out so that we can improve our chances, because all of this is, at the end of the day, sounds like it's an odds game. So how do we stand out in building that character? What are some practical things? I know you mentioned research, but what are some practical ideas that we can incorporate in trying to build it?
Absolutely. I think there are multiple components to it, but I can tell you there are some advantages, with which IMGs have, because you see how the paradigms in medicine in general in this country are going to. We see a lot of disparities. We see a lot of disparity in health, in gender, and all those things. And if you literally, try to pinpoint these disparities in a lot of developing nations, we have been facing them for a long period of time. So the cohort, which is being studied right now, we have seen that happening all our life. And there is a lot of things which can be done on those things. I can just give you a very small example of infant mortalities, right? In developing nations, and I say that because I come from a developing nation, and I don't want to be disrespectful in terms of all IMGs are coming from developing nations, but a lot
Yes.
of IMGs are coming from developing nations. So let's talk about this infant mortality. Somebody who's interested in peds, there are so many factors which play a role in infant mortality, in infant and child morbidities, which are not seen here because of the cultural or the environmental issues which we have in developing. I'm just saying from a very basic standpoint, the things which we can work on. Basic research projects. We don't need a lab to look into these disparities there. We have the accessibility, we have the workforce to get us those data points. We have the public health support to get us those data points in our countries back home. And just imagine, having some sort of a meaningful project on very basic things which you have experienced and your family has experienced throughout your whole life. And coming with that background and showing that you already are so much passionate about health equity, working on certain areas where this country needs work on, it always will put you on an advantage. And I'm glad that I'm seeing some mindset which has changed in IMGs who are bringing these things on, as they apply now. The other thing which I would mention is that though the step one scores are just pass and fail now, there is a major chunk of the program directors who have started taking keen interest in the whole profile. Maybe when they would read a personal statement once, maybe now they're reading it twice. They are looking at every clerkship and every data point in their MSPs in such a way which was not seen by them in the past. And that also has been something which I personally have been feeling since this switch has happened, that personal statements and the way you are approaching the program, the way you are showing your interest in that particular program, it really is making a lot of difference. And I'll tell you, there have been a couple of residents which I'm training and I have taken where the differentiating factor was these things which I just.
Yeah. And, sometimes when we do a podcast like this, I always like to give the bullet points, because some people will still ask, but okay, so what are you saying? What are you really saying? Right. So just to be redundant, I'll say it again. So I make sure that our audience really gets what we're saying. What we're saying is there's no formula. There is no cheat sheet. There is no code to this. Who you are matters a lot, as much as your academic performance on a standardized test. So what we're saying is you want to build this character, this picture of someone who is able to show or demonstrate a strong commitment to the specialty that you are indicating interest in. Case in point, Dr. Kichloo mentioned pediatrics as an example and said, instead of waiting for your career in pediatrics to start when you pass your USMLE and move to the United States, you could, however, begin to work in and alongside of important issues in pediatrics right now where you're located that will prove your commitment to your specialty down the road. So one of the key areas, and I say this because I've seen this time and time again, I get people who email me all the time, oh, I want to come to you, so I want to do this. What are you doing right now? I'm at home. But what are you doing right now? I'm studying for the USMLE. But what are you doing right now? We don't need to deviate our passion for a specialty until we move to the US, especially if we can be answering questions that are pain points for humankind wherever we're located in that particular specialty. Because down the road, that would eventually build that character of a person who has proven interest in peds from when they were located in Cameroon in West Africa or in Northern India or wherever you're coming in from. The second point that you're mentioning to us is the whole packet matters. And for those who are listening, you may be wondering, what's the whole packet? Well, when you go into ERAS to make an application, there is the formal application form that you fill out. And Dr. Kichloo mentioned, the things that you're putting on this application are now going to get read, because obviously everyone's sort of like, did you pass or did you fail? There's a CK score, however, but now on your application, they're looking at the quality of what you're presenting. How is this showing your commitment? How is it showing your passion? How are you explaining yourself in that personal statement? It is personal for a reason. So it's that one area where you can talk about things that did not make it on the ERAS form because there's not a box for it. How are you leveraging your letter writers? I get this question from IMGs who tell me, oh, I'm an old IMG. I can't get a dean's letter. I'm like, you can. Why wouldn't you get an MSPE? It's not optional. Like, it's not like they're saying maybe give an MSPE, right? So because there are noteworthy characteristics on there that once filled out can give an added perspective of you as the applicant. And so what we're saying is, yes, there's not a formula, but it's bringing all of yourself, that personal aspect in your personal statement, that objective information that maybe your dean has of you or your other preceptors from medical school, your professors are able to input into those separate characteristics as how you performed in different classes. But then in addition to that, what you are also presenting as coursework. And even if it's not coursework, maybe your passion for that specialty is being proven in the research work that you're doing. That's how you build a character. that is able to demonstrate a commitment to a specialty. And, to that point, I wanted to ask you another question on something that you mentioned, which is, in light of this shift that we're seeing and the changes in the healthcare system and, this holistic review of applications that applicants, now are like, well, what do we mean by holistic? Are they really holistic or not? What are some no-go areas? What are some areas that you would recommend for IMGs to steer clear of, whether it's in the presentation of a personal statement or in the presentation of work information? Like, are there any like taboos that you've seen, or, because culturally we're coming from a whole different culture. We may have not grasped an understanding of what it's like to work in the American system. And so what are some taboo topics or areas or caution that you'll give for an applicant?
Sure. I think the biggest concern sometimes we have when we see an application is a candidate who has had experience in P, jumped onto the surgery, jumped on to do an OBGYN rotation, is doing some observership or externship in neurology, and is applying for internal medicine. So it clearly shows the confusion, and the principles around which healthcare is built in this country is passion. It's about your vision of what you can contribute within your field. Obviously, you get a lot from it as well, but what you can contribute in this field and how passionate you are about that field. So you have to be very, very clear in terms of representing yourself. What are you trying to do? What are you looking for? And that is one thing which I will say that every IMG has to keep in mind to have a track. And I think you mentioned it a couple of times about building your character around a certain profile which you are passionate about. That is the most important thing which I would suggest all learners.
Yeah. And I agree with that too, and I'm laughing because it's something that I've noticed as well. And I usually ask, if you go out to play a game of darts, for example, and you have the center target and you need to get your dart in that target, but then your dart is everywhere else, you wouldn't hit your target, right? And so I feel like in medicine, it's sort of the same. Like, you cannot tell me that you're interested in one thing. And we're not saying that you wouldn't have diverse experience, but let a majority of your application paint the picture of someone who is committed to a certain idea. Because yes, medical school requires you to have more than one experience, right? In medical school, we go through all the, for those of us who have to do a housemanship year, for example, you may have to rotate in OB-GYN, in peds, and in surgery. But when you're representing that application beyond that housemanship year, you then need to be able to prove commitment to your dedication to neuro now moving forward, maybe in the selective experiences that you chose to do thereafter. So yeah, you did the housemanship. That's great. We like that. But then when you chose to do an observership or you chose to do a research project, how did you make that selection? That is really where you can make a distinction, because that was a choice of yours. You chose to volunteer. Well, volunteering at the stroke project could be more important for you who's interested in neuro or in IM, because it could be applicable for both, than maybe a volunteer position in, I don't know, pathology, which it'll be really hard pressed to prove commitment to neuro when you spend a lot of time in cytology. So building that picture really is about staying true to your passion, guys. I think that's what Dr. Kichloo is telling us today. Stay true to your passion. Yes, you're going to meet several opportunities, because a lot of us sometimes feel like there's a sparse, there are scarce resources, right? We don't have maybe exposure for many observerships or things in the thing that we want. And so we take whatever we can get. But you, I think, have a lot in your hand that you don't see, in my opinion. Like IMGs, like, you can definitely seek out opportunities that will put you in the right place and be selective. You don't have to take just what you think. You can press in on what you can find. And so speaking on that, Dr. Kichloo, I want to get your opinion on the topic of U.S. clinical experience. What do you think is the true importance there? Because, a lot of times IMGs, we know we need to get USCE, but why is that such a big thing, if that makes any sense?
This question, even I was not able to figure out till maybe last 5 years. I have been able to answer to myself what exactly is happening here. I think it has more to do with the electronic medical records rather than the ethics of medicine. We talk about the US clinical experience, we have to know the US healthcare system. But if you think about a passionate, competent physician coming from any part of the world, will have the knowledge and the art of execution of that medical knowledge. What they won't have is the art of how that is translated in daily practice in this country. So, having knowledge of informatics, having knowledge of electronic medical records, different settings in those things, inpatient, outpatient, procedural, and all those things. If you can have that differentiating factor in terms of maybe your subject has been informatics or your subject has been some sort of a technology related thing, built on these things. I know there are courses which are done on these. There are things which you can do in your own country because things are moving in the same direction in different countries as well. And if you can prove that you will be a quick learner in terms of all these aspects, it might be to your benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'll be hard pressed to have a program director on and not ask, how does the, right? how because this is a pressing question. I just get all the time in their head. They're like, how do I make the ring? So can you, and I know every program is different and every program has their own different internal structure. And we're not asking you necessarily to share the specifics of your program and how you process that, but give us a general idea, because sometimes the question is, we come through, or we may have already built that character, we have our research experience, we have our USCE, we've passed our boards, we apply, we get a few interviews, but then we don't match. And so can you speak to what's really happening between September and March in behind the scenes in the program?
A lot of meetings. So I think this is an area where IMGs have to learn a little bit of more art, which is take every person you interact, or even the person who is in the background, very seriously. Because when the teams meet, the selection committees meet, everything which is good obviously is discussed, but everything which caught somebody's eye also is discussed. I'll mention a quote of my brother. He's a TEDx speaker as well. He says that it's not only the flame which is important, the flicker is important as well. Now, when I say that, you are doing everything fine, it is getting attention. There is something which happens, which is a flicker that will catch an eye, and that will be embedded in the minds of your interviewees and the people you are interacting with. So make sure your interaction with everybody around is very, very good, because everything will be noticed and discussed in the selection committee. You can reach out to the programs showing your interest in a very decent, polite way. When I say decent, polite, professional way, I am including the way your fonts are set in your email and your pronunciations are and your grammar is, because everything matters. And sometimes it might be something which I should not have paid attention to, but sometimes I'll see an email and I'll be like, so this person didn't take a couple of more minutes to make this email a professional email. So that speaks something of, what you're going to get at the end. So everything matters, because, you have to understand program directors, coordinators, DIOs, we're all human beings. We want our kids at home to behave in a certain way. That is how we want our residents to behave as well when they come in. And as program directors, as teachers, we always have to build on and be advocate of your learning from a point onwards. If we think that we have to rectify something and we have to build something which should already have been built by this time, that is an additional burden. And I use the word burden because we have to focus on your learning. We can't be focusing on building some very basic blocks. So have this whole, holistic approach when you are interviewing, responding, or, interacting with anybody in the selection panel.
That was so beautifully presented, because I think there's a lot of mystery for those that are applying, and they feel like, I don't really get it. I don't get it. Why did I not get that position? Why did I not match? And things like that. And I like the analogy of the flame and the flicker. because sometimes it's in what's not and what was left unsaid that you wonder, why didn't this person take this opportunity to expand on that? And a small question like that can make a difference between highly likable to liked, but not high enough, right? And yeah, that was a really good one. So in light of how programs classify for creating the rank order list, can you give some interview tips or pointers for IMGs who really want to make that good impression, really want to convert people over to their side to say, I want to work? What are some pointers, maybe on the do or don't do side, whichever one?
Sure. On the do side, I would say, obviously, when you have built that character, which we have been talking about, you have to have a way of conveying and communicating that character to the whole selection panel. Now, when you do it, you have to be sure that you don't look stubborn or you don't look snooty about your presentation. Everybody is looking for a team player. Everybody is looking for having people who are humble around them. So keep that in mind. Good confidence is amazing, but you have to check yourself whether you're going towards overconfidence. Be very, very careful about that as well. You have to remember, once you have made it to the interview selection, you have been selected for an interview, half the job is done. And now everything which was presented in an application is something which might be discussed, but will actually not be discussed, because now it is you. It is your work ethic. It is your ways of communication. It is your ways of dealing, having your personality, which will be looked at. So you have to work around these things. And sometimes I think that we in our own minds think that we will ace it, but we don't practice enough to present ourselves in the way we want to. So practice, we as IMG sometimes are not used to being in these situations. We as IMG, I can talk about, how things are in back home in the country I came from. You just take a test, you rank and you get in. That's how it is. We are not used to, proving our worth by communicating. So there's a different aspect of it which you have to work on. And I would suggest everybody to make sure that you have some practice before you come in front of the interview panel, because half the job is already done. Now it is you who can secure or mess up with that interview.
I agree 100%, because yeah, I come from the same system where you take a test and if you do really well, you're in, no questions asked. And actually at that point, you have all the bragging rights based on how well you actually did on that test, and that's it. And now you come to a system where your personality matters, your true character matters, and how you portray that even matters more. And sometimes it's hard. And then you have some of us, some IMGs that are coming from really high positions in their home country. They're well respected in their career, and they find themselves having to sort of eating this humble pie. And it's like, how? Like, where do you start, right? But unfortunately, or fortunately, it's a good virtue, humility. Confidence is another great virtue to have, which I think a lot of times we get mixed up and think it's something that you're gifted with, and when it's just practice in essence. It's been a great conversation with you, Dr. Kichloo, and I don't want to leave without asking you, what are some from your own personal story as an international medical graduate who did some research work at Yale prior to starting out your career in pursuit of your graduate medical education journey? What are some final words and tips from your journey? What are some things that you applied and you used on your path that could encourage the next?
I think we all want the best in the work environment. When you start your career, you always will face challenges where you would think, that might have to be that way, not this way. I would say be that person to make the change rather than waiting for others to make that change for you. Complaining is easy, doing is tough, but do it, and somebody has to do it, and that somebody has to be you. That has changed the whole trajectory of my career, and I'm a strong believer that this mindset can help a lot of families.
Oh, I love it, and I think that is absolutely valuable advice. I wanted to ask about your research career as well. I know we're running short on time, but if you just don't mind to share a little bit about how you got into research to start with. And I mean, I was looking on PubMed, and the pages on your name were like 1 out of 50. And I'm like, okay, wait, I can't get through all of them. But I saw some papers that caught my attention. One on early mentoring for research and academic careers, which I thought was really a great topic, especially for what we're doing today. And then another was on the current challenges for researchers during the process of submission and publication, which could probably be a little bit more in depth. But as far as early mentoring for research, what are some keystone ideas that you want our listeners to take home with if they're looking to start out and maybe don't have research background, because they're thinking, I want to build this character, right? I want to build this character that shows an interest in radiology. And so I'm going to do some work in research around radiology as an example. Can you share with us a little bit more about some of the findings of your paper?
Sure. Actually, did a grand round on it, and I will, mention certain things from that grand round. Actually, there could be a lot of reasons why you want to do research. You want to match in a good residency program. You want to match in a good fellowship program. You want to have a career in research, and so on and so on. And sometimes I mention that you want to do research so that you can put that publication on your Facebook page or an Instagram page, just for the sake of that. That's the only purpose. No purpose is less of a. Remember that part. Every purpose is a good purpose. And once you start doing it, and if you're doing it for a right reason, and again, even putting on Instagram is not a wrong reason, even that is the right reason, eventually you'll see the motivation and the satisfaction it comes when your work is applauded and it is cited by other researchers. It is used by other researchers. And there will be a time if you find a good mentor and you are working with a good team. And again, that topic is a separate topic altogether, how to find a good mentor and a good team. This is going to get internalized in you. And once research is internalized in you, it will be a part of your daily living, because as you're seeing patients to get them better, you are contributing in other ways for your colleagues, where you're making their life easy. I'll just give you a very small example, which is just something very personal to me. My dad went through some, disease processes and had colorectal cancer, and saw him in a lot of pain with regards to radiation proctitis. And I wanted to know more about radiation proctitis. I could not find a single review article on it. And that made me wonder, there might be other people around me who want to have a comprehensive review on that. Yeah. And rather than only searching for it, I took the task. And I think that is the only comprehensive review article in clinical endoscopy, which we wrote on radiation proctitis, and we got a lot of encouragement for that article. So research is something which, once you internalize, is going to benefit not only you, but everybody around you. And I am a strong believer that we as physicians, as teachers, it is our responsibility to provide more answers rather than asking more questions. And that has been my mantra. And I hope the listeners will resonate with that.
Thank you so much. Because I think you just dropped a tip there on writing review articles as even a starting point for some of us that are wondering, where do I go? How do I start? And I like that you said there's no wrong. Even if you want to put it on your Twitter account, that's good enough reason. So it's been my pleasure to have you, Dr. Asim Kichloo. I really appreciate you taking your time away from your busy workday to do this interview with me. I know that it would impart the lives of many, many, many IMGs. I'm going to have this question because everybody always asks me, how do I get in touch with the people on your podcast? Is there a way, a page that you recommend if people want to keep up with you, or they may want to follow up on something that you've said? What is and a lot of people like to share the social media or the Twitter. Where do we find you when you're feeling social online?
Mostly on Twitter, which is almost a passive information for me, but I put a lot of my own work there, and a LinkedIn page. These are two pages. I can share my Twitter with you if you don't mind. We are all in the habit of just using the Twitter, but then we don't even remember our own user's name. So it is Asim Kichloo. It's simple, ASIMKICHLOO. And you can see my work there and, have a conversation there with me.
Okay, awesome. We'll have that in the show notes as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Look at you. I'm so proud of you for listening until the very end.
And because of that, you deserve a reward. And I want you to go right now to drninaloom.com and download any of my free ebooks, whether it's for electives or clinical rotations, or even just whatever trials come your way as you navigate your IMG journey. Stay tuned for another episode coming up next.